and welcome back to Why This Film, the podcast where we reach back into your childhood, pluck out a movie, give it a rewatch, and have a chat about it. I'm Emily Slade, and welcome back. You watched it so many times before, and now you're gonna watch it again. But it's been so many years since you last saw it, and now you show it to your friends, and they're like, what?
What am I watching?
Why this film? And I'm joined today by Alex Helm. Hello.
Hello there.
Welcome. And his chosen movie was 1947's Black Narcissus, the IMDb breakdown. After opening a convent in the Himalayas, 5 nuns encounter conflict and tension, both with the natives and also within their own group, as they attempt to adapt to their remote, exotic surroundings. What is your relationship with this movie?
Well, the first time I saw it, I was about 5 or 6, and it was on a Sunday, preparing to have my Sunday roast. So I always have that connection with that film. And I think I've seen it several times on a Sunday since.
It's a very Sunday night movie, those big...
Well, historically, BBC used to put a Saturday movie on at like 2 or 3 o'clock. And yeah, you used to sit down with a family and have a roast and watch a film.
Yeah,
basically.
perfect.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. When you said it and I looked it up, and it's like a psychological thriller with nuns and Deborah Kerr from the 40s. I was like, what? But the director is, I'm going to say, Mike Powell, am I correct?
Yeah, Michael Powell, yeah.
Who I believe also did The Red Shoes,
Yes.
which is one of my all-time favourite movies.
It's stunning. They're all. The thing that has always attracted me to his films is just the colour is vibrant, the lighting is painterly. It all comes from Jack Cardiff, who's a very hugely influential cinematographer. He pioneered cinematography and inspired people like Michael Scorsese.
Martin Scorsese.
Martin Scorsese. Michael. Yeah, Martin Scorsese. I mean, when you look at some of his films, like Mean Streets, there's a direct reference to Michael Powell.
Wow.
Actually, he introduced Michael Powell to teach at his film school in New York.
Amazing.
And I think Michael Powell moved to New York as well, I think.
So cool.
Don't quote me on that.
Okay. We'll Google it. So this movie is, as we said, it's about. I mean, it's such a great character study, and it's so brilliant for actors. Deborah Kerr was 25 at the time, and this was her breakthrough role. And I know her from The King and I, mainly and only. But she's brilliant in this. She's absolutely fabulous. Gene Simmons is here, who I know from Howl's Moving Castle.
Which is very early in her career,
17.
and quite an unusual role for Gene Simmons.
Problematic, but it was the 40s. She plays a sort of native, and obviously she's not native.
That's the kind of thing that's a bit tricky, is the representation. Yeah, how people perceive that representation of different ethnic communities.
It's troubling because in this day and age, there's sort of no excuse for it.
But the nuns are seen to be racist. They are.
Yes.
It's not. It is referenced in the film of them being racist.
Yeah, 100%. They feel very isolated, and that they're quite cruel towards the sort of local people. But the casting of Gene Simmons as a white woman who has then sort of been tanned and her hair has been darkened, and it's just like wrong. But it doesn't wholly distract from the movie. I think her character is fairly small to the
But she is captivating in that role. She's very stunning.
She's beautiful.
And the dance sequence.
Yeah.
It's magical. In this day and age, you kind of, when you think in those terms, it is kind of, feel a bit slightly uncomfortable. But as a 5-year-old, it didn't even really dawn on you. And I didn't even know at that time.
Absolutely.
There's some people now, you look as an adult, you see that's clearly not a native Indian or...
Yeah, and as I say, it's like with all these old movies, I don't think it's an excuse enough to let them slide into no longer watching them. I think they are still relevant. Gone with the Wind is still it's in my top 5 all the time, and yes, it is so problematic because it's about the Confederates and the Civil War, and the slaves are represented in such a way, but also it gave us the first African-American female Oscar winner. So, like, you know, everything sort of, you have to take things within their context, but understand that it doesn't slide nowadays. But it's just something that I wanted to sort of flag, just to then sort of be like...
well, that's the kind of thing I was thinking about last night, how people would view it from a different generation. But the characters aren't... I mean, the characters are quite humorous.
They are.
They are kind of... they're quite intelligent. You know, they're not demeaned wholly, are they? They add something significant to the film. That they add a kind of a bit of spice and a bit of... There's a kind of knowing mischief about them all as well.
That's such a good way to describe it, because I'm not going to lie, when I read the sort of synopsis and it started, and you've got these 5 white women in these full-on habits playing these nuns, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to differentiate any of them.
You have Sabu, who is actually native.
Yeah.
And he was one of the biggest film stars of his time.
Really?
Yes. He was in The Thief of Baghdad.
Oh, brilliant.
Jungle Book.
Oh!
I think we've forgotten about him now, because it's 60, 70 years ago, but he was a massive film star at the time.
Oh, wow.
So, and he was,
It's brilliant, and like everyone in it is fabulous, but I was worried that I was going to not be able to differentiate the characters, that like they would all meld into
clearly introduced, aren't they?
But yeah,
you notice they
are all so different. And
the nuns are introduced by the lead nun, aren't they? And you see them, and there's a little shot for each character, and they're described. And also, kind of the general was introduced.
Yes, yeah.
In a kind of nice, kind of sort of slightly cheeky way. It's kind of.
This is the thing. There's that underlying, as you said, mischief to this movie, which I didn't expect, because my only other sort of understanding of nuns in movies had been The Sound of Music, where you had like Maria, who was like a badass, and then all the other nuns just seemed really like lame and boring. But in this, they're wholly human, and they constantly talk about their lives before they became nuns, and you forget that like nuns are people. Like,
yeah, well, you forget they're nuns, really, don't you? Well, if you didn't look, you were just listening to it, you would just think they were just, because they are very human characters.
Absolutely.
With their own human flaws,
needs.
Which is. I don't think I paid attention to that when I was 5.
No.
I think I was sort of mesmerised by Deborah Carr.
Yes.
She kind of, the expression of horror and discomfort of the things around her is a common thread in many of her films. If you see the film like The Innocents, like a horror film, just captivating. It's just something, that wide-eyed English rose that kind of, you can see why she was a massive star.
Oh, 100%.
That kind of, you wouldn't think somebody who is so self-contained and controlled in a lot of the characters that she plays in various other films, that would be enticing, but there's something...
Yeah, it's like she's like about to explode all the time, but she keeps it in, and it's such subtle screen acting, and it's so
It is, but it's not dated.
No.
Her acting specifically is not dated.
It's not at all.
I mean, she's an upper class character, but there's kind of a realism to what she does.
100%. She's very grounded, very real, relatable.
I was always fascinated by her. She was always one of my favourite actresses from a really early age. And I've seen most of her films.
Oh, amazing.
And actually, I was watching a film as I came out, which is I See a Dark Stranger, which is another turning point film for her, where I think it's about the IRA, and she's trying to help somebody, and it's kind of very dark thriller.
This is the thing as well, I didn't expect it to be so dark. It's very... Black Narcissus is very slow, but not in a bad way. It takes its time to establish all of these uncomfort and this unsettling vibe.
Because it's a pace that belongs to the time it was made.
Yeah.
It's not a kind of pace.
It's very isolated. They're on top of this mountain, and the wind keeps blowing.
And the sets, I mean, that's filmed in England. Those sets, look, all those skies and the mountains. They're paintings.
They're gorgeous.
They're paintings. Well, Jack Cardiff used to paint old master paintings. He painted, so he had a painterly eye, which you could see. It's like a moving painting, isn't it? That's the first thing you're kind of taken aback by as a child. This like moving painting,
this world that they've
and
built.
painterly light on the faces of the actors. It's just so.
It is gorgeous and it is very dreamlike. And someone kept coming in to like tell me that dinner was ready or that like did I want a cup of tea, and every time I'd be like fucking hell, because I didn't realise how like tense I was.
I'm so pleased you liked it. I really am.
Like it, without even realising it, lulls you into this sense where you suddenly like take a step back and you realise that you're like digging your fingernails.
Yeah, because I wondered what you would think about it.
Yeah, because I do love old movies, and I find it a lot easier than perhaps others to go back into those worlds.
I think it's because I saw it at that time, and it is that scene. It's that specific scene right at the end on the bell tower. I mean, you cannot forget that scene. The build up to it, everything.
The build up is perfection.
It's
and
like
then
a duel.
The scene itself.
Yeah.
There's this one nun within the monastery that's been
she's a bad egg.
Gone slowly. When we're first introduced to her, she's sick and recovering.
Sick, yeah.
So you don't even consider her as a threat, because immediately I was like, oh well, like one of them's probably going to die.
And immediately Deborah Carr's character, the expression on her face when her name is mentioned, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Is she jealous of this person? This person gets beneath Deborah Carr's skin. And why? We're never really told fully why, are we?
Is it nature nurture? Is it the way they treat her that causes her to go the way she does, or is she always just crazy? There's really interesting interviews as well where the director wanted a particular performance out of the actress, but the actress refused and insisted on
there was
pushing for... And you get to see what the actress wanted, and like
because Kathleen Byron had worked. Well, they both had all worked with someone like Michael Powell before. Deborah Carr had worked in Colonel Blimp, The Life, and Kathleen Byron had been in a previous film as well, and she'd had a relationship with Michael Powell, which was very brief.
But enough
tempestuous.
To have some
well, she's included it in one of his biographies, and Kathleen Byron talked about it, and she said it was a complete fantasy. He lived in a bit of a fantasy world. It's about something like that, putting a gun on him before having sex or something. Something very strange.
It's wonderful, and thank God she pushes for the performance that she's allowed to then give, because it is so perfect. She understands this woman, because I think they were basically with everything that's going on, she's sort of
severely mentally ill.
She, for want of a better word, she goes crazy.
She's feverish. She's literally feverish. There's no colour on her face.
She's got this gorgeous like red eyeliner that makes her look so.
And you have a close up.
Mad.
Yeah, you have a close up of it, don't you?
It's iconic, and she's obsessed with this man that hangs out with them in the place, and she's convinced that Deborah Kerr is in love with him, and she's just convinced herself of all of these things, and she goes to confront him, and he turns her away. So she comes back to the place, and Deborah Kerr goes to ring the bell, which the bell tower is situated off this sheer drop, this cliffside, and it's on the poster, and it's clearly that sort of vertigo moment where like it's the massive climax of the movie.
When you consider when it's made, 1947, that's before the film Vertigo or the big kind of like Rear Window and all those things.
Yeah, the sort of big thrillers.
And all the kind of big horror films, like the Hammer films and things like that. It predates those. But it's all those kind of things. This film must have been hugely influential in that respect.
100%.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of aware that one of them was probably going to end up falling off that cliff, because they set it up very well. Every time someone rings the bell, you're looking over the cliff, drop of this cliff. And so the whole time I was like, okay, come on, who's it gonna be? Who's gonna fall off the cliff? Kind of thing. But even with that expectation of just like, I watch a lot of movies, and it's very easy after a while to be like, oh, this is gonna happen.
Well, I suppose now everybody's seen that kind of scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was 5,
you've never seen it.
That was really, really tense. That bit, was she gonna? Because it's very close. She's literally uses her leg to yank herself up.
She comes up behind Deborah Kerr and she shoves her off, and Deborah Kerr hangs on to this rope. And like the struggle of her getting her foot back onto the cliff, and then eventually she manages to push Ruth off, and Deborah Kerr's fine.
But it's been an accident, isn't it?
I got chills.
Yeah.
I honestly was like, even though I was like, someone's gonna fall on that cliff, there's gonna be a struggle, oh my god, crazy lady. Even though all of that was already in my brain, I was fixated to the TV screen, and I was just like, this is scary.
And it's so beautifully choreographed.
Yeah, it's like
literally her leg
specifically choreographed to music.
She wedges her leg, and basically Sister Ruth is accidentally swung over. So there's no malice in there. It's not even a fight.
It's
a survival,
yes,
isn't it? And it's just an accident. One falls off the end because she,
And it's chilling. Like a shiver went down my spine, and like it's just
because
so
Sister
well
Ruth
done.
despises. She's jealous.
Yeah.
Of the effect, the attention she gets from the male lead, David Farrar, who plays Dean, I think.
Dean, yeah.
Yeah. But I also think, is the Sister Ruth character a symbol? Is she the dark side of Sister Clodagh?
Well,
because it brings up memories of Sister Clodagh's past, where she was wearing lipstick, and she had a boyfriend, and all those kind of things. And it's as if Sister Ruth's fraught sexuality is a kind of reminder of something that she's put away, and she's
a life before.
Because Sister Clodagh is trying to push something out, isn't she? She's very controlled, but it's a fierce control, isn't it?
Yeah,
and she's scared, and she is very scared of Sister Ruth all along.
Yes, yeah.
But there is I think there is a jealousy on both sides or something. I don't know.
It's genuinely a fascinating character study. I imagine it's the kind of movie that, as you say, when you watch it as a child, there's a thrill from the horror at the end. There's a sort of awe of the masterpiece of the cinematography and how it looks. And then as you grow up, you can really see it for this masterclass in acting and this masterclass of direction and these like true character studies of Deborah Kerr has a monologue where she talks about her old life and how she's trying to put it behind, and it's so restrained but it's so emotional, and it's just again I was
and
like,
then you start to see the warmth in her.
Yeah, she starts to emote, but then the minute someone tries to,
it's a very clever performance, because
she was
I don't know about you,
25.
but you like Clodagh. You like Sister Clodagh.
Yes, I do.
And you sort of question, why do I like Sister Clodagh? Because she's very spiky, isn't she?
Have a lot to do with Deborah Kerr herself. Like, you know, when you just have those actors that you just warm to, regardless of who they're playing, they're just charismatic and
well, in real
watchable.
life, when you see interviews with Deborah Kerr, she's very charismatic, very charming, cheeky, very much a lady. Everybody talks very highly about her. That she. Like she spoke to, because as you said, Kathleen Byron had problems with some of the direction and used to get into fights with the actors, but Deborah Kerr never did. She said, well, I just let them think, I just listened to them and then do what I was going to do anyway.
Amazing.
Which is a good tip for everybody.
Yes.
Because we've all had directors like that. And usually an actor's instinct, you know, if you're a good actor, is
to just sort of go, of course, smile, smile, smile.
June Whitfield had the same policy because she worked with very difficult comedians. So, yeah, remember that.
Yeah.
Listen to the best.
tips from Deborah. But it's wonderful, and because these nuns are in these sort of white habits and we're in this lush sort of setting, when there is sort of horror and not gore per se on screen, it's also memorable. One of the nuns comes in at one point covered in this red blood, and it took me like
a surprise, startling,
I was like, Jesus, like.
Well, it's a very, very, very slow build, and then suddenly it goes crazy, doesn't it? It's not quite, you know, like a slasher movie or anything like that, but it's like they're all kind of building up, all teetering on the edge. They're ill, all the various nuns, and they're kind of struggling to deal. And the whole theme of the film is being out of place.
Yeah.
Being out of place, out of your depth. And I don't know quite, that's kind of fascinating, isn't it?
It's so fascinating. It honestly, like, I didn't know what to expect from this movie. And it was just brilliant, and it goes to show of that sort of back in the day when they couldn't do Tarantino buckets of blood, where they couldn't do CGI, where they couldn't like put a talking raccoon in it. They had to rely on storytelling and acting and craft, and every shot is so considered and
beautifully crafted.
Obviously, there were movies coming out in the 40s that were crap, and they haven't.
Well, every shot is a painting.
Yeah,
it's a painting. And it's
this
just
time and care is timeless, and it's like Gone with the Wind. They make these moments that, you know, you can chop off as many limbs as you want in Hostel 14, but when you see the baby on the slab and they're talking about how sick it is and that they can't do anything for the mother, and the next scene you don't even see the baby, you've just seen it writhing and helpless, and they're talking about it, and then the next scene the baby's not even there, and they're talking about how it's died, and it's so gruesome. It's so gruesome and terrifying, and then you've got this hostility of like the natives have killed previous people for less, and
it's
like,
actually based on a book, isn't it? So I'd be quite interested to see the book, where the book came from.
Yeah, whether it has elements of truth in it. Almost, of like someone's visit to somewhere.
Well, my mum went to a convent school.
Okay.
And her description of nuns were they're quite scary and controlling. But the nuns in this film aren't they? They're all very quite different characters.
I read somewhere that they're referred to as working nuns. So I imagine there's the nuns that sort of sit and pray, and perhaps they're the ones that are stereotypically more cruel because they're more sort of like repressed, I guess, whereas these ones are like working in the garden and they're doing this and they're doing that, and all of these things keep going wrong. Like one of them was set to plant vegetables, and 6 months later when the spring comes she realised she's planted flowers instead, so they have nothing to eat, and just little things like that that just layer upon layer.
Makes you want to sort of do some research on nuns, which is a bizarre thing in itself. The only thing that kind of is a mystery is what the motivation for Sister Ruth being there.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it almost feels like
maybe she's pushed there because she's mentally ill, and that society was stigmatic, stigma at the time.
Yeah, and like she's sort of, and even to be pushed into this situation, because at the very beginning of the movie, the sort of main old nun is like,
she doesn't like.
I don't think you're going to be a very good Mother Superior.
No.
I don't think you should have been allowed this opportunity, and I hope you fuck it up.
Yeah.
Please take this mentally ill young woman with you. So it's almost like she's planted specifically to fuck Deborah Kerr's nun career up, because this old woman doesn't like her at the beginning of the movie.
When my mum was at school, she did have nuns that had done that kind of work. So she had, and they were all different nationalities. I mean, probably the film should have probably been better if they were all different, different accents. Because often that's the situation. They are, they're all from
instead of all being sort of.
Well, a lot of my mum's fellow pupils, they were all from different countries. So she was around kind of a lot of people. She went to Luton. She grew up in Luton, which is kind of quite ethnically diverse. So she had lots of kind of people from Egypt and Ireland.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and the nuns were as well. So they had kind of a lot of nuns seem to have kind of a very. They go on quite a long kind of spiritual journey. So, which you can sort of see. It's not always kind of clearly described in the film as to what brought them to be in that place.
They sort of mention it as that one nun that's sort of like, I keep trying to forget these memories, and in this place they keep coming back to me, and I have to leave. She ends up leaving and like resigning and like moving places, and Deborah Kerr finally like cracks in this monologue but then brings it back in. The other one goes completely mental.
And I often get sort of the impression about people who take that monastic life, they're running away from something.
Yeah.
And that's clearly the case with Sister Clodagh.
Yeah,
she's definitely running away from.
Hoping to marry a man who then went off to America without her, and whether it was the shame or just the sort of upset led her into the nun life, #nun life, and she sort of is still there today, and she's clearly so young, and she's given all this responsibility, and it must just be overwhelming to constantly be suppressing these like memories and these emotions to then try and live this life. And I loved that none of them, because I also read somewhere that this movie is set up to sort of make you think that a bunch of nuns move to a mountaintop place and there's a man there and they all fall in love with the same man and women will be women, hilarity and chaos ensues.
Really?
That's what I initially
thought. Well, he is a very
because he's charming and he's funny and he's respectful to their religion, but also like grounded in what he believes in, and they all sort of like him. And Deborah Kerr has her sort of wry smiles at him every
There's
now
lots
and then.
of sexual innuendo.
Yeah.
In nearly everything. He obviously is attracted to Sister Clodagh. It's very, very
But I imagine
well
at
written.
the time with censorship as well, that it plays very well because they wouldn't have been allowed to show a lot of things. And I did enjoy that these people stick to their values.
It's
Nobody
very kind
hooks
of
up with him.
very subtle innuendo. Very.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's just
brilliant.
really cleverly written, his lines, and he delivers them very magically.
Oh, he's
somebody who's very in charge of his sexuality, isn't
Yes.
he? That's kind of thing. He's a representation of the thing they can't have.
almost the outside world in a way.
And kind of he's very manly, isn't he? He's in his shorts with his legs apart, kind of giving it some.
Sort of tanned and muscled.
And he's a very kind of he's employed them. He's their employer.
But very chill.
He confronts them with a lot of the things they're kind of
scared to
scared
confront.
of.
Yeah,
and he's very brazen, isn't he?
Very. And if it were made today, 100% there would be a scene where him and Deborah Kerr's character kiss, and like 100%, they would just take it too far. And because he just puts her hand on her shoulder, like after her like monologue where she's burst
She
into
develops
tears.
sincere affection to him, doesn't she?
But she also
Respect.
pushes him away immediately, and it's like, no, I'm still like a nun, and like
she does put him in his place, doesn't she? So like that's rather inappropriate. Or
and it's brilliant because like as the audience, you almost are like, get together, you guys should kiss. But it also gives more weight to the other nun's story where she's like, you love this man and he loves you and he should be loving me and I'm crazy now. But because no one does anything, you're like, you can't fucking prove it. Also, oh my god, like,
that's
maybe
the beauty of it. There's lots of mysteries.
Like, she's perhaps justified in her feelings, but she's also, obviously that's not an excuse to push
You
people
don't
off
really
bell
know what her
towers.
feelings are, do you?
Yeah.
About anything.
No.
It's through a glance that you'll have any kind of clue, and you're left. That's what's the beauty about
What's wonderful
the film.
is if you were told one of the nuns go cray-cray by the end of this movie, watching it from the beginning, you might be able to pick up that it's going to be Ruth. But there's a point within the movie where it could really have been any of them. They all start to crack in different ways.
So the Flora Robson character, well, she starts to work us off so hard that she puts her hands out, she's got covered in blisters. They become
all
sick.
All of them sort of, they're all sick, they're all up high top, they've got this wind.
And then when Sister Ruth really lets rip, they kind of go crazy. And then the funny old lady's like, Sister Ruth, Sister Ruth. And it kind of really breaks the tension, doesn't it?
She's such a bizarre character, and I assume she was mainly put in there for comic relief. But,
I'd never seen her in anything else up until recently, because I watched Talking Pictures TV, which is just old films.
Oh, amazing.
You've got to get it. It's number 81 on digital channels, you know.
Perfect.
And it's basically, it's all kind of old TV series, all that. I'm not sure if they've shown Black Narcissus yet. As I have it on DVD, I don't really need to know. Let's just...
Yeah, she's when we first introduced her, she's sort of the housekeeper of the building on top of this hill, and she's originally referred to in the letter from Dean as a faithful, dirty old bird. And I was like...
But she is a dirty old bird.
Oh, we are in the 40s, but then you meet her and she's gross, for want of a better word, and she's violent and she's crass, and you've got all of these sort of like very sort of RP, all-in-white nuns who are teaching the local children, just women, mind you.
She's quite anarchic, isn't she?
And this woman that's just like beating people with a broom.
But it's hilarious, I have to say.
It is, because the Gene Simmons character, I don't think she has any lines. I don't think she says anything. Does she? The Gene Simmons character.
No, she doesn't.
Doesn't say anything.
But she's trouble, isn't she? But what's she actually
does so
done?
much in a look.
I think she's kind of been promiscuous or something.
Well,
she's there because she's been a naughty girl, isn't she?
The implication is that she has a full hold of her sexuality.
And she's very furtive, and she flirts with...
It does beg the question, as a 17-year-old, how much was in her control? You know how everyone wants to brandish
I'm trying to think how old...
Catherine Howard
I think
as a
Gene
slut,
Simmons was about
but-
15 or 16 when she died.
Yeah, she was a baby.
Yeah.
And so you wonder, like, a 15-year-old, regardless of their upbringing and culture, will not have that. They may think they want this and they may think they know what they're doing, but ultimately she was probably a victim of sexual abuse somehow, and then she's been cast into this monastery and brought in front of all of these nuns, and then a prince turns up and she falls in love with him, or not even falls in love. The sort of implication is that she's this sort of femme fatale, like she's like hiding under chairs, like looking up at him blinking, and
The kind of representation, it's I would say it's more slightly has a fairy tale quality rather than sort of putting down people of different ethnic origins. It's more of a fairy tale representation, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, and is that sort of exotic, like, oh, look at the fun, promiscuous, exotic, which is problematic in itself.
When other characters reference their kind of differences, you dislike the person that refers to it rather than the person they're referring to. Like Sister Ruth, you think the things that she says are despicable.
Yes.
So you dislike her. You don't actually dislike the person she's making the comment about. You don't dislike any of the native characters, do you? They're quite endearing, and
they do very much refer to they constantly bring up the story of the beggar maid and the prince or something.
But it's very much a fairy tale, isn't it? Kind of thing. I think it was more innocent times. Mm-hmm. There's an innocence to it, isn't it? It's like when you look at film now, it's represented quite differently.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at actual fairy tales and that sort of buzz around when they first brought back the sort of Arabian Nights tales, and we started sort of stealing ideas from these cultures that we found exotic and fascinating, and we
Michael
would
Powell
represent them in our movies.
and Emmerich Pressburger had done all those films, The Jungle Book.
Yeah, we had this fascination with the
Thief of Baghdad. They're all kind of Arabian Nights tales and things like that. And, so there's fascination.
An absolute fascination of it, where we were just like, oh, this is ours now, and we'll make it look sexy and fun. And it's like, there's problems with that as well, but I guess it is nice to have bought.
I mean, in a way, the film has an element of fairy tale about it, because it's almost something like Grimm's fairy tales, the black nun and the white nun, and they battle and
good triumphs, but then it's not that simple either, because these people are holy.
It's all layers. It's all
You don't want her to die. You want her to get help, but
there's lots of symbols, isn't there? It's got the kind of symbolism that you have in film noir. The final scene where kind of two nuns are confronting each other. That's pure film noir. When Sister Ruth puts on the lipstick, it's like she's cutting her mouth open almost, because it's like blood red, and she's using it as a weapon to attack Deborah Carr.
It's funny because
because she's horrified when she sees her put the lipstick on. She's actually
it's a brilliant scene. We've seen these women in these full-on habits this whole time for like an hour and a half, and then Deborah Carr opens a door and there's Sister Ruth there without her habit on, in this gorgeous red dress with her hair done beautifully, looking like a movie star. And it is a shock to Deborah Carr, and it's a shock to us, but it's so brilliant.
It's shock, one after another, isn't it?
And it's so tropey to have the sort of evil, mental, crazy lady in the red dress with the red lipstick, but it's so much more than that. This is where it began, and it's not just a sort of throwaway image to sort of make you think certain things. It's establishing.
Well, it's a kind of battle between heaven and hell as well, because they're up in the gods, aren't they? In this like Himalayan mountain, in the clouds. It's very heavenly. And then there's this big drop, which is like hell.
Yes, that's so true.
She emerges from the door while Deborah Carr is ringing the bell, and she emerges the door like Medusa. Her hair suddenly turns into straggles.
Constantly got like sweat on her forehead.
I think it's deliberately meant to be like Medusa. Her hair goes into these very thin.
It's brilliant. It's so beautiful. You're right. Every shot is like a painting. It really is wonderful.
I mean, that scene alone is why I go back to it, because it's captivating. It's beautifully shot.
Incredible. It was so well done. It really, really was.
I don't know quite what it meant to me as a 5-year-old. It's kind of like, I love films that have shock.
I
don't know what that says about me. But
you know that there's something here. Yeah, we all like being scared, and I think it's very important for children to be scared. And in the same way that when I would watch Gone with the Wind, and they would do the scene where they would amputate a soldier, and you didn't see the amputation, you just saw the silhouette of it, and Vivian Lee's face going, oh no, I don't like it. That was enough for my overactive imagination.
One of my favourite actresses as well. I mean, the screen just absolutely worships Vivian Lee. She just basically threw her whole, basically killed her, didn't it?
Yes.
I mean, she had all kinds of mental health problems and physical health problems.
That she would put into these characters.
Well, doing, was it Streetcar Named Desire?
Killed her. Like...
She was almost like a method actress in that role and actually became an nymphomaniac. She became the character.
Yeah. Because she did it for such a long time. She did it for the year on stage, and then she went straight into shooting the movie. She couldn't drop.
Kind of difference about those kind of actors is they were kind of artists as well. They knew how to work a close-up, knew where the light was. They kind of knew how to measure the performance. This is the difference. It's like these films, the performances are not contrived, but they're measured.
Yeah.
The emotion is building up inside, so the emotion inside is real, but they're also thinking how aesthetically that works and balancing those two things, and then giving you the kind of sort of killer punch at the end of a film.
It's powerful. It's powerful film acting and movie making that you can't really compare to today.
Well, the thing is, there's a kind of, in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a kind of big emphasis on being real and everyday, which kind of was very inspiring at the time. But really, acting is not real life. It's a heightened form of real life. And really, when you sit in a cinema for 2 to 3 hours maybe, you are going for entertainment. You want to sort of be moved, have something that connects with your real life, but also take you outside of reality. That's the reason why I kind of love all these old films. I love all the silent movies where it's just, they are working without dialogue completely, and it's kind of movement and expression is everything.
Yeah, the time and the care that goes into them, and the time. It's like watching an Edgar Wright movie today. He takes such effort with every
I think that's
shot.
why kind of certain films lose the impact, because to move people, there has to be a build-up. There has to be a journey you go to get there. A lot of it's too kind of rammed in your face, and you're worn out by the end of the film because it's like
lazy and simple. Like, not to shit on it too much, but I watched Fisherman's Friends last night, the movie, which is 5-star all over the place, a charming, simple story, but it was just a lazy film. It was just very harmless and easy and not impactful and quite forgettable, and it's just such a shame because it takes such a long time, money and effort to make movies. Make them good, make them stand out, make them art. They are a form of art.
I think kind of filmmakers in the early days, as I understand it, had more freedom. You have more kind of characters, and you still, in some ways, we moved on in terms of the representation of women. But you have early cinema. You had Greta Garbo, who did not fit into any box in terms of the conventional female, male. She just broke all, and she was a massive film star. She was huge,
and then Katharine Hepburn came along
Katharine
again.
Hepburn, who wasn't a conventional stereotype. There was only one of these people, Marlene Dietrich. They were all kind of very unique people. And with Marlene Dietrich, there's in Morocco, the lesbian kiss. Yeah, she's dressed as a man. Well, that's kind of, in a way, it's kind of an awkward thing to say, but she's dressed in a tuxedo, which in those days is considered to be a manly dress. But it's kind of all kind of things that, do you see that now so much? I think we're going back to actually break the gender ban. But things are so much more interesting when it's not all like a cookie cutter of when people have uniqueness
comes through, and they have this star quality about them, don't they? That's just so watchable, and the camera genuinely loves them, and you can create these stories around them, and it's fascinating. And I think old movies shouldn't die out, and I'm so happy that a lot of cinemas do sort of play them.
Well, the good thing about this Talking Pictures TV is it's promoting movie heritage.
Yes.
And I think kind of if you don't look at the heritage, you miss out. You're missing something.
Without a lot of these movies, other things couldn't happen. Like we mentioned, how this was pre-Hitchcock almost, and Hitchcock must have drawn inspiration from all of these things. And someone else took. Oh no, that was something else I read. You know when you just read so much trivia.
Well, Martin Scorsese is the big advocate of Michael Powell, and because basically Michael Powell made a very controversial film called Peeping Tom, which has involves prostitution and pornography. It's referenced. It's not like a pornographic movie, but it was banned and it ended his career virtually.
What?
And that's why he lived in New York as a teacher.
Oh.
And he did make a few kind of...
Peeping Tom is like a cult classic.
Yeah, because this is 1947. This is when he was massive. Then he made Peeping Tom in 1960, I think.
It was the first sort of point of view
he
villain.
basically ended his career.
Which is insane because it's now on the top 100 every horror movie ever made list, and it's noted for its first use of a point of view camera.
I think it introduced censorship as well, or something like that.
Yeah,
It's X-rated. But it's nothing X-rated in my eyes,
no,
or
it's
your
like
eyes probably.
Madame Bovary now.
There's a topless. There's a topless scene in it. It's kind of there's subversive things in it, but it's presented by old-fashioned comedy actors, and it's kind of looks very innocent. But I think it's just.
At the time, it must have been radical. Like,
well, there's a man goes into a shop to buy a pornographic magazine in Soho.
Which was probably something people didn't even consider.
But it's done so comically.
Yeah.
You just can't really.
And to think that was just the 60s.
And it ended his career.
My parents were alive in that time, and yet this ended this brilliant film director's career because it's insane. This was it. Black Narcissus inspired 2013's Frozen with its snowy landscapes. It took inspiration visually from this.
Jack Cardiff especially was groundbreaking. He developed new techniques in how to use the camera. I'm not that technologically minded. I've watched documentaries about him, and his career went on for about 50, 60 years. He actually directed his own films, which aren't really kind of note, but he was an artist. And his view, I mean, you don't really get kind of filmmakers or cinematographers kind of discussed in the same way.
Yeah, it's so true. But
we've lost some of the artistry, and
I think so. Like the award seasons these days are always actors, directors, and sometimes costume. But
I've noticed they're actually showing old films at the main cinemas now. They're showing Kind Heart and Coronets. They've remastered that, and they were showing it at the View Cinema a few months ago. And I think
it's so important.
That's such an important film to watch. It's so witty and it's an healing movie.
Perfect.
I mean, I don't know how many people go to see it, but it's good it's there.
When I went to see Gone with the Wind, when they brought it back out for the anniversary, I went to the cinema to watch it, and I was just surrounded by people that would have seen it in the cinema first time round. And
oh, right. First time around.
Well, lots of
they must have been old.
Were next to me.
It's 1939, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it was one of the first big Technicolor.
Yeah, epics.
Well, the thing is, these films are made in Technicolor, so it's the first development of colour movies.
Yeah.
So they are very vivid.
They used to this is the thing when they have, you can see it today where James Cameron made a new camera and he made Avatar and it was a massive success, but you forget how something as simple as this movie's in colour and we're going to use that to our advantage, which is why they then find symbolism in colour in a way that they never were able to.
I'd love filmmakers to go back and actually use those old cameras again.
I mean, it must be expensive and it must be but you can do it. Come on, if you're making a new camera,
surely you must be able to.
Yeah, just use an old one. It's fine. Yeah, because that sort of almost grainy look as well is just so gorgeous. The aesthetic of
it's the same kind of colour you have in The Wizard of Oz.
Yes,
there you go.
Exactly.
There is a kind of element of Wizard of Oz in Black Narcissus, isn't there?
Yeah.
Which when I first saw that's kind of. It's still quite magical, isn't it?
It is literally still magical to this day when she opens the door from sepia to colour. Even though I watch everything in colour today, that switch.
Well, I guess things aren't coming around because now we have the CGI, which is a kind of a digital painting. So they are things are getting more painterly. They do look a bit plastic.
This is the thing, because then you watch, in comparison, you watch Oz the Great and Powerful with James Franco, which is a terrible movie. and they do the same thing where they have the opening sequence in black and white, and then when they get to Oz they switch it to colour. But I can't even remember. I remember the hot air balloon sequence within the tornado because that was good, and it was good visually.
It's sort of done, there's an innocence to the way it's done as well, isn't
but
there?
I can't remember the switch from black and white to colour. And I should be able to because it's...
You clearly do.
You can in The Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for...
Thank you. I'm glad you really enjoyed the movie.
No, I really did. And
it's kind of a very special movie to me. I think it's because I've kind of grown up with it. I've watched the film, so it was a little bit of a chore to watch it last night because I've seen it so many times. You know, because there's not the element of surprise.
Absolutely. But it's fascinating that you've taken it with you all of these years, and like.
Well, it kind of follows you about because Kate Bush was very inspired by Michael Powell and did the album Red Shoes.
Oh yeah.
And she met him before he died.
Oh wow.
And well, there's the Hounds of Love, which there's another film as a childhood I saw was Gone to Earth, which inspired Hounds of Love. So there you go.
Gosh.
Big love of Kate Bush. Then realise the other people you love the people you love.
Yeah, and
it's love all around.
Feeds from everything. Yeah, feeds into everything.
That's the kind of thing I find interesting. The things that you love are always connected to other things, so you never really kind of they come back to you.
Yeah,
they follow
definitely.
You.
It's
Yeah.
almost full circle in this industry. But anything you want to plug? Where can we find you on social media?
Aside from being an actor myself, I also run the East Anglian Actors Network, which supports actors in Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex and Cambridge actors, and as I work as a casting director sometimes, I help them get work with actors, offer them advice and support. So and we're actually here today to have our first network meeting of 2020.
Very excited.
We're in the 1920s again.
Yep.
The roaring 20s. Yeah. So
amazing.
Bring it on.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's an absolute pleasure.
And we'll see you next time on Why This Film. Bye. And you can follow Why This Film on Instagram at Why This Film Podcast. We're on Twitter at Why This Film Pod, and we're on Facebook at Why This Film Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, come on as a guest, or have any movies that you'd like to suggest, you can email into us at whythisfilmpodcast@gmail.com. Episodes come out every Tuesday in all your normal podcasting places.